This is HOA craze. I did not raise my voice, I raised my evidence packet. You are making my case for me, Angela shouted, jabbing her finger at the orange survey stake I had just hammered into the ground that morning. She was standing on the sidewalk corner by the community entrance sign, where everyone in Stonehaven Ridge Association could see us, her phone on speaker held high, like it was some kind of compliance shield, screen turned away so I could not read whatever she claimed was official. I could fine you daily until you begged for permission, she said, voice loud enough to carry across the street. I work as a cybersecurity analyst, so I save every email and timestamp, and I had already started a folder the day she left her first notice on my door 3 weeks ago. This was Montreal, Quebec, and the mailbox cluster down the block had become the unofficial courtroom, where neighbors stopped to watch disputes unfold, and right now half the street was pretending not to stare. Angela Parker had been the landscaping committee lead for Stonehaven Ridge Association for 6 years, and she treated property lines like personal territory. My mortgage refinance inspection was scheduled in 2 weeks, and any active dispute note in the HOA file could derail the whole process, so I had hired a licensed surveyor to prove my fence setback was compliant. The surveyor had placed 4 stakes along my rear property line yesterday, bright orange plastic caps on metal rods, each one marking the exact boundary. This morning 2 of them were gone. I replaced them an hour ago, and now Angela was here, demanding I pull them out and move my fence anyway. She claimed the setback rule was 15 feet, not 10, and that my fence violated the covenant regardless of what any survey said. I had read the covenant 3 times. It said 10 feet. She did not care. I decide what counts as compliant, not you, Angela said, stepping closer, her shadow falling across the stake. That was her favorite line, and I had heard it twice already this month. I straightened up, wiping dirt off my hands, and met her eyes. I have a licensed survey, I said. The stakes prove the setback. She shook her head, pulling up something on her phone. A licensed survey does not override association authority, she said. You are in violation, and if you do not submit a fence modification plan by Friday, you will start accruing daily fines. I asked how much. She smiled. $50 a day, retroactive to the original notice date. That would be over $1,000 already, and I had not even built anything yet. I was planning to replace a rotting section of fence along the rear property line. Nothing fancy, just a 6-foot cedar panel fence to match the rest of the neighborhood. I had submitted the application 4 weeks ago. She had denied it in 3 days, claiming the fence height exceeded guidelines. The guidelines said 6 feet was fine. She said guidelines were subject to committee interpretation. I asked Angela if she had read the covenant section on setbacks. She said she wrote the covenant. That was a lie, because I had checked the county records, and the original covenant was filed in 1998, long before she moved here. I did not correct her lie, because I wanted her to commit to it in public. A board member named Eric was standing near the mailbox cluster, pretending to check his mail but clearly watching us. I could see him glancing over every few seconds. Angela noticed and raised her voice. Your contractor will not be allowed back on association property, she said. If I see any work vehicles, I will have them cited or towed. I pointed out that my driveway was private property. She said the street was not, and any contractor parking on the street without a permit would be reported. I asked what permit. She said she would send the form. She never did. My mental health had been fragile for the past year, and the harassment was pushing me to the edge. I had moved to Stonehaven Ridge hoping for a quiet neighborhood where I could work remotely and not deal with constant confrontation, but Angela had turned every home improvement project into a battle. The fence was just the latest. Before this, she had threatened fines over my mailbox paint color, my driveway edging, and a potted plant on my front step. Each time, I had complied, and each time she had found a new violation. This time I was not folding. I had the survey, I had the covenant, and I had a spreadsheet tracking every notice and threat she had sent. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the stake, then a photo of Angela standing over it. She demanded I stop. I asked why. She said I was creating a hostile environment. I said I was documenting the dispute. She said documentation was harassment. Angela turned and walked toward her car, parked at the curb. Before she got in, she called back over her shoulder. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there, she said. Every meeting, every month, until you comply. Then, she drove off. Eric came over a minute later, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. He said Angela had been aggressive lately, and that a few other homeowners had complained, but no one wanted to challenge her directly because she had allies on the board. I asked if he would be willing to witness what just happened. He hesitated, then said he would prefer to stay neutral. I thanked him anyway and went back inside. I had work to do. That afternoon, I emailed the surveyor and asked for a formal letter confirming the setback measurements. He replied within an hour, with a PDF stamped and signed, stating that the fence line I had marked was compliant with the 10-foot setback required by the recorded covenant. I forwarded the letter to the HOA management company with a polite request to close the violation. The management rep, a guy named Curtis, replied the next morning. He said the landscaping committee had discretion to interpret setback requirements and that my fence plan remained under review. I replied with the covenant section highlighted and asked where the 15-foot rule came from. Curtis said he would check with Angela and get back to me. He did not get back to me. 2 days later, I went outside to check the stakes again. All 4 were gone. I found one in the bushes 10 feet away, bent. The others were just missing. I called the surveyor and told him what happened. He sighed and said this was not the first time he had dealt with HOA interference, but it was the first time someone had physically removed stakes. He offered to come back out and replace them at no charge, and he said he would note the removal in his records. I said yes. He came that afternoon, and we spent an hour resetting the stakes and taking photos of each placement. He also tied a string line between the stakes to make the boundary unmistakable. The line was bright yellow nylon, pulled taut and clipped to each stake. It looked clean and professional. Angela showed up 10 minutes after he left. She walked straight to the string line and yanked it. The line snapped loose from one stake and whipped back, tangling around her hand. She yelped and dropped it, then turned on me, face red. "You are obstructing committee access," she said. I asked what committee access. She said the landscaping committee needed to inspect the setback area. I pointed out that the setback area was on my property. She said the committee had easement rights. I asked her to show me the easement document. She said it was in the covenant. It was not. I had read every page. I asked again. She said she did not need to prove anything to me, and that my refusal to cooperate was going into my file. I asked what file. She said my compliance file. I asked to see it. She said homeowner files were confidential. I said that was convenient. Angela pulled out her phone and took a photo of the tangled string line on the ground, then a photo of me standing there. She said the damage to association property would be added to my fine total. I pointed out that the string line was mine, not the association's. She ignored me and walked back to her car. Before she left, she leaned out the window and said my contractor vehicles would be cited or towed if they returned. I asked if that was an official board decision. She said she did not need board approval for enforcement actions. I made a note of that. That night, I got an email from Curtis at the management company. It was a formal notice of violation, dated that day, stating that I had failed to remove unauthorized survey markers, and that I was now subject to daily fines of $50, effective immediately, until the markers were removed and a revised fence plan was submitted. The notice said the association had received complaints about the markers creating a safety hazard. I replied and asked who complained. Curtis said complaints were confidential. I asked how a survey stake was a safety hazard. He said the stakes were in a high-traffic area. My backyard was not a high-traffic area. I forwarded the email chain to a lawyer friend and asked for advice. She said it sounded like selective enforcement and that I should document everything, including any evidence that Angela was acting without board authority. She also said I should check if the management company had insurance for wrongful fines, because that could be leverage. The next morning, I called a contractor I had worked with before, a guy named Sam who specialized in fences and decks. I explained the situation and asked if he was willing to start the fence work despite the HOA threats. He said he had dealt with difficult HOAs before, and that as long as I had a survey and a permit, he was fine. I did not have a permit yet because the city required HOA approval before issuing one, but I told him I was working on it. He said he could at least dig the post holes and get the foundation work done, and we could pause if the city pushed back. I agreed. He said he could start Monday. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went outside to check the stakes again. 2 were missing. The string line was cut. I called the surveyor and told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said he had never seen someone this determined to obstruct a survey. He offered to file a complaint with the county about the interference, but he warned me it might not go anywhere because HOA disputes were usually civil matters. I thanked him and said I would think about it. Then I called the police non-emergency line and asked if removing survey stakes was a crime. The dispatcher said it could be considered tampering with a land survey, which was a misdemeanor, but I would need proof of who did it. I said I had photos of the stakes before and after, and I had a witness who saw Angela pull the string line. The dispatcher said I could file a report, but without direct evidence of removal, it would be hard to pursue. I filed the report anyway. The officer who took it said he would note it in the system, and that I should call again if it happened again. Sam showed up Monday morning with his crew, 2 younger guys and a truck full of tools. They parked on the street in front of my house, and within 10 minutes Angela was there. She pulled up behind the truck, got out, and marched over. She demanded to see their permit. Sam said they did not need a permit for post holes. She said any work on association property required a permit. Sam said he was working on my property, not association property. She said the setback area was under association jurisdiction. Sam looked at me. I showed him the survey letter. He nodded and turned back to Angela. "We are digging where the homeowner tells us to dig," he said. "If you have a legal issue, take it up with him." Angela pulled out her phone and took photos of the truck, the license plate, and each crew member. She said she was reporting them for trespassing. Sam shrugged and told his crew to get to work. Angela got back in her car and sat there, watching. The crew spent 3 hours digging post holes along the rear fence line. They marked each hole with spray paint and measured everything twice. Sam took photos of each hole before they started and after they finished. He said he always documented HOA jobs because disputes were common. Angela sat in her car the entire time, phone in hand. When the crew finished and started packing up, she got out and walked over. She handed me a printed notice, freshly printed, stating that all work was to cease immediately pending a committee review. The notice said failure to comply would result in forced removal of any installed materials and additional fines. I asked when the committee review would happen. She said the next committee meeting was in 3 weeks. I pointed out that my refinance inspection was in 2 weeks. She said that was not her problem. Sam looked at the notice and shook his head. He said he had seen this before, and the best move was to keep going and let her escalate, because HOAs rarely followed through on forced removal threats. He said if she wanted to stop the work, she would need a court order, and that took time. I asked if he was sure. He said he was sure. I told him to keep going. He said they would be back Wednesday to set the posts. Angela heard that and said she would have the truck towed if it parked on the street again. Sam said the street was public parking. Angela said she would call the city. Sam said go ahead. She got in her car and left. That night, I got a call from Curtis at the management company. He said the board had been informed of the unauthorized work and that they were considering an emergency meeting to address it. I asked if Angela had informed the board or if she was acting alone. Curtis hesitated, then said the information came from the landscaping committee. I asked if the landscaping committee had the authority to issue stop work orders. He said committees had enforcement discretion. I asked if that discretion included overriding a license survey. He said he was not a lawyer and could not answer that. I asked when the emergency meeting would be. He said he would let me know. He did not let me know. Wednesday morning, Sam and his crew came back. They parked on the street, and Angela was there within 5 minutes. This time, she had a tow truck with her. She pointed at Sam's truck and told the tow driver to hook it up. Sam walked over and asked what authority she had to tow a legally parked vehicle. She said the association had an agreement with the city for parking enforcement. Sam called the city parking office on speaker and asked if there was a towing order for his truck. The clerk said no. Sam handed the phone to the tow driver. The driver listened, shrugged, and told Angela he could not tow without a city order or a private property owner's request. Angela said she was acting on behalf of the association. The driver said the street was not association property. He unhooked his rig and left. Angela stood there, shaking, then turned and walked to my front door. She pounded on it. I opened it. She said I was in violation of multiple covenants and that she was moving to have my amenities access revoked entirely as punishment for questioning her authority. I asked what amenities. She said pool, clubhouse, and mailroom. I did not use any of those. I told her that. She said it did not matter. Sam finished setting the posts that day. He used concrete and left them to cure. He said the next step was to hang the panels, and he would be back Friday. I thanked him and went inside. I was exhausted. The constant confrontation was wearing me down, and I was starting to wonder if it was worth it. Then I got an email from Curtis. It was a notice that the board had scheduled a hearing for the following Tuesday to address my violations. The hearing notice listed 4 alleged violations, including unauthorized construction, failure to comply with stop work orders, obstruction of committee access, and creating a safety hazard. I had not committed any of those violations, but the notice said failure to attend would result in automatic fines and possible legal action. I replied and said I would attend. I also said I would bring evidence. Curtis acknowledged the email. I spent the next 3 days building my case. I printed every email, every notice, every text message. I organized them into a tabbed evidence binder with sections for each violation. I included the survey letter, the covenant, the county records showing Angela did not write the covenant, the photos of the removed stakes, and the police report. I also included the email where Curtis confirmed that the landscaping committee did not need board approval for enforcement actions because I wanted to prove Angela was acting without oversight. My lawyer friend reviewed the binder and said it was solid. She also suggested I request a copy of the meeting minutes for any board meetings where my fence was discussed, because if there were no minutes, it would prove Angela was acting alone. I sent that request to Curtis Friday afternoon. He replied Monday morning and said there were no relevant meeting minutes because the matter had been handled at the committee level. That was exactly what I needed. Tuesday evening, I arrived at the clubhouse for the hearing. The board met in a small conference room with a long table. Angela was already there, sitting at the head of the table with two other board members. Curtis was there as the management rep, sitting off to the side with a laptop. Eric, the board member I had talked to before, was not there. I sat down and placed my binder on the table. Angela looked at it and frowned. She opened the meeting by reading the list of violations and asking if I had anything to say. I said I had evidence that the violations were fabricated and that she had been acting without board authority. She said that was not relevant to the hearing. I said it was absolutely relevant. Curtis cleared his throat and said I should be allowed to present my case. Angela glared at him, but nodded. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA chaos. I opened the binder and started with the survey. I explained that I had hired a licensed surveyor to confirm the setback, and I showed the board the letter. One of the board members, a woman named Lisa, asked if the surveyor was aware of the association's setback requirements. I said yes, and that the surveyor had used the 10-foot requirement from the recorded covenant. Angela interrupted and said the committee had updated the requirement to 15 feet. I asked when. She said it was an internal policy. I asked if the policy had been approved by the board. She said committee policies did not require board approval. Curtis shifted in his seat. I turned to him and asked if that was true. He said he was not sure and that he would need to check the bylaws. I pulled out a printed copy of the bylaws and read the section that said all policy changes required a board vote. Angela said that was an old version. I showed her the date. It was from last year. She did not respond. I moved on to the removed stakes. I showed the photos of the stakes before and after, and I explained that someone had removed them twice. I said I had filed a police report, and that the surveyor had noted the interference in his records. Lisa asked if I had proof that Angela removed them. I said I did not have direct proof, but I had a photo of Angela pulling the string line and a witness who saw it. Angela said the string line was a safety hazard and that she had removed it in her capacity as committee lead. I asked if she had removed the stakes as well. She said she did not recall. I let that sit for a moment, then moved on. I pulled out the email from Curtis where he said the landscaping committee did not need board approval for enforcement actions. I read it aloud and asked Curtis if that was accurate. He looked uncomfortable and said he had been relaying information from Angela. I asked if he had verified it. He said no. I asked the board if they had authorized Angela to issue stop work orders or threaten contractors with towing. Lisa and the other board member, a man named Tom, both said no. Angela said enforcement actions were within her committee authority. I pointed to the bylaws section that said enforcement required board approval. Angela said that only applied to fines. I asked what she thought a stop work order was. She did not answer. Tom asked to see the binder. I handed it over. He flipped through it, stopping on the county records page that showed the original covenant filing date. He asked Angela when she claimed to have written the covenant. She said she had helped draft amendments. He pointed to the date. She said the amendments were not filed with the county. He asked to see the amendments. She said they were in committee files. He asked Curtis to pull the committee files. Curtis said he would check, but he did not recall seeing any setback amendments. Angela's face was red now. She said this was turning into a witch hunt and that she was just trying to enforce the rules. Tom said the rules needed to be clear and consistent, and right now they were not. Lisa asked me about the forced removal threat. I showed her the notice Angela had handed me. Lisa read it and asked Angela if she had authority to order forced removal. Angela said she had consulted with Curtis. Curtis shook his head and said he had told Angela that forced removal required a court order. Angela said she did not recall that conversation. I pulled out a text message from Curtis where he had said exactly that. Curtis confirmed it was his message. Lisa closed her eyes and sighed. She said the board needed to review Angela's enforcement actions and that all violations against me would be suspended pending that review. Angela protested. Tom said the decision was final. Angela stood up and left the room. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. I walked out of the clubhouse feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Curtis caught up with me in the parking lot. He said he was sorry for the confusion and that he should have pushed back on Angela earlier. He said the board was going to conduct an internal review and that I would hear from them soon. I thanked him and went home. I emailed my lawyer friend and told her what happened. She said it sounded like I had won, but I should stay alert because Angela might retaliate. She was right. The next morning, I got a call from a city building inspector. He said there had been a complaint about unpermitted fence work at my address and that he needed to come out and inspect. I said I had not applied for a permit yet because the HOA had blocked my application. He said the complaint stated that I had already installed a fence. I said I had only set posts and that the surveyor had confirmed the setback. He said he would still need to inspect. I agreed and scheduled it for that afternoon. When he arrived, he looked at the posts and the survey letter. He said everything looked fine and that as long as I got the HOA approval and submitted a permit application, I was clear. He also said the complaint had come from an anonymous source, but the wording matched other complaints he had seen from HOA enforcement. I thanked him, and he left. That night, I got an email from a homeowner I did not know. Her name was Rachel, and she said she used to work for the management company before Curtis took over. She said she had heard about my dispute with Angela and wanted to warn me. She said Angela had a history of selective enforcement and that she had used similar tactics against other homeowners who challenged her. Rachel said she had left the management company because she was uncomfortable with how Angela pressured staff to back her up on questionable violations. She also said she had seen Angela communicate directly with certain contractors and vendors, and she suspected there was some kind of favoritism or kickback arrangement, though she did not have proof. She offered to talk to me if I needed more information. I replied immediately and said yes. Rachel and I met the next day at a coffee shop. She brought a folder of old notes and emails from her time at the management company. She explained that Angela had pushed several homeowners into expensive landscaping projects using the same setback and compliance threats, and in multiple cases, the homeowners had hired a specific landscaping contractor that Angela recommended. Rachel said the contractor was a guy named Derek who had been doing work in the neighborhood for years, and she suspected Angela was getting referral fees or free work on her own property. She said she could not prove it, but the pattern was clear. I asked if she would be willing to share this information with the board. She said she would, but she wanted assurance that it would not come back on her. I said I would talk to Tom and Lisa and see if they could keep her name confidential. She agreed. I emailed Tom and Lisa that night and explained what Rachel had told me. I said I thought the board should conduct a budget review to see if there was any evidence of vendor favoritism or improper payments. Tom replied within an hour and said he agreed, and that he had been concerned about Angela's behavior for a while, but had not had enough evidence to act. He said he would bring it up at the next board meeting, and that Rachel's information would be kept confidential. Lisa replied a few minutes later and said she was in. The board meeting was scheduled for the following week. I did not attend, but Tom emailed me afterward and said it had been intense. The board had voted to freeze all enforcement actions pending a policy rewrite, and they had launched a budget review to examine vendor payments and contract approvals over the past 2 years. Angela had objected loudly and accused the board of undermining her authority. Tom said the board had given her a written warning for harassment behavior and told her that any further retaliation against homeowners would result in removal from her committee role. Angela had walked out again. The budget review took 3 weeks. The board hired an independent auditor to go through the records, and the auditor found multiple red flags. Derek, the landscaping contractor Rachel had mentioned, had been paid over $60,000 by the association in the past 2 years, far more than any other vendor. The auditor also found that several of the contracts had been approved by Angela alone, without board oversight. Most damning, the auditor found invoices for work at Angela's personal property that had been billed to the association as common area maintenance. The total was nearly $8,000. Tom emailed me the summary and said the board was considering legal action against Angela. He also said all fines against me had been voided and that my fence application was approved. Sam finished the fence 2 days later. It looked great. Clean cedar panels, perfectly aligned. I walked the property line and checked the stakes. They were all still there. I took a photo and sent it to the board with a thank you note. Tom replied and said he was glad it was resolved. He also said the board had voted to remove Angela from the landscaping committee and that she was no longer allowed to issue enforcement actions. Curtis sent a separate email apologizing for the confusion and saying the management company would be implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar issues. A few weeks later, I ran into Eric at the mailbox cluster. He said he had heard what happened and that he wished he had spoken up sooner. I said it was fine and that the board had handled it. He said Angela had been complaining to anyone who would listen, but most people were just glad the enforcement chaos had stopped. He also said the board was planning to refund a large batch of late fees and improper fines that had been tied to Angela's notices, because the audit had found that many of them were issued without proper authorization. I said that was good. He nodded and walked away. I never saw Angela again. I heard she moved out a few months later. The fence is still standing, exactly where the survey said it should be. The stakes are still there too, bright orange and unmistakable. I kept the evidence binder in my office, just in case. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.